Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Beat the Big Guys. I'm your host, Sandy Rosenthal, and together with my producer, Landry Bone, getting ready to bring you another fabulous show. And today, my guest hails from the great city of, I'm drawing a blank. The great city of, Asheville, North Carolina. And her name is Dawn Westmoreland. Hello, Dawn.
Hello there. Yes, I've been in Asheville for about 20 years now.
I haven't visited Asheville yet. I was supposed to go visit Asheville, and boom, COVID hit.
Oh no,
I,
goodness.
I was so disappointed. Had a big trip all planned, all kinds of interesting things to do, and nope, COVID nixed that. And then I was going to visit my son, and then since then he moved away. He's not there anymore.
Oh, well, I hope you do get to come here. The best time to come here, it really is year round. There's so many beautiful things to see.
That's what I've heard. I've heard that over and over again. I've read books from that area that just make me want to just go there. So I will figure out a way to make that happen. But before we go any further, there are some of our listeners out there who may not be familiar with your fantastic work and your book. So if you allow me just a moment to bring them up to speed. Okay.
Yes, I'm honored.
Dawn Westmoreland supports safe and respectful work environments through speaking, writing, coaching, HR consulting, and as a syndicated radio host. She has over 30 years of experience in human resources. Dawn's written a book, The Empowered Whistleblower Book, and also Stand Up to Workplace Bullying and Discrimination Workbook, which has received laudatory testimonials from employment attorneys, mental health experts, behavior consultants, and readers. So I and all of our listeners cannot wait to hear your story. Take it away, Dawn.
Well, first of all, Sandy, from one whistleblower to another, thank you for having a show like this to talk about whistleblowers. And thank you for letting me be on your show. It's really an honor.
My
So
pleasure.
I never thought of myself, Sandy, as a whistleblower. I just thought of myself as doing the right thing, the person who does the right thing. And it really goes way back to when I was in the Air Force. I'm retired from the Air Force, and I blew the whistle on a corrupt chief master sergeant in the Air Force and received death threats. Well, fast forward, I got through it all, and I was, commended for standing up for it and all. But about, let's see, 12 years ago, I was working in the second largest federal agency, the Veteran Affairs, and I become a whistleblower again. Although, again, I never look at it, Sandy, as being a whistleblower. It's just doing the right thing. So, as you said, during the bio, and thank you for that gracious bio, I now have over 30 years of HR. One of the first things that I saw was nepotism. And for anybody out there, it's like, okay, we're not HR. What is nepotism? Nepotism in the government is illegal. It's a prohibited personnel practice. And what it is when you hire within, like your friends and your family, big no. It's illegal in the government, but happens all the time. So I noticed when I was working in the revenue part of the VA, I was not working in HR at that time. It was a short time I took a break from HR, that there were only 5 Black employees and that there were only about 500 white folks. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness. Okay. I've been in the Air Force 20 years, lived all over the world. And I'm thinking, I see what's going on here. I address it with management, and they're like, shut up, sit down, Dawn. And I'm like, wait a minute, it doesn't work that way. So I turned him in to the Office of Special Counsel and got a lot of retaliation. And that's where you turn in prohibited personnel practices in the government. And so retaliation was pretty fierce. And I know we talked about this, Sandy, before the interview, that, you can get all kinds of bullying and retaliation. And I did. They cut off my paycheck, and I ended up having to, downsize from a really, really nice home in South Asheville, selling about 80% of everything I own. I mean, they came after me hard and heavy. And I guess I discovered more than I realized, was more going on than just, hiring practices. But it dragged out about 20 months, and I kept getting charged with illegal things that I had never done before. And that was so frustrating. And I ended up in the hospital for a few days because of my safety, security, and I was exhausted. But, I stuck it out. And I know you and I both have had the privilege of meeting Erin Brockovich, activist Erin Brockovich. Most people know her, even the young folks, most of them know her. And I remember interviewing her, and we talked about, stick to itness. That was the strength I had. I hung in there, even though life was sucking big time. I hung in there and I took it to the very end. And yes, it took about 20 months. And I kept, getting bullied and retaliated and defamed and such. And it was pretty awful losing my home. And I have to tell you, the worst thing that happened to me wasn't losing my home. It was having outstanding credit. And all of a sudden I've lost all this money because they cut off my paycheck to punish me. And then having to sell in a time, we had just gone through 2008, 2009. And, it took me 9 months to sell a house that would sell in one day today. The whole house was remodeled at half acre, beautiful landscape. And, after 3 days in the hospital, I decided that, you hear this little voice in your head. It's like, you are supposed to help people. And I thought, okay, fast forward, I was able to settle without a gag order so I could talk about my story today. Most people can't do that. It's pretty unusual. And people wanted to know, well, how did you do that? So moving forward, I ended up meeting a gentleman who's retired from the Army Intelligence, retired from the FBI. He was one of the creators of Homeland Security. His first name is Tom. And if I told you his name, you'd never find him anyway on the internet. He's not searchable. But Tom, through a mutual friend between us, wanted to meet me up in DC. And I met him a couple times. Great guy, he's in his mid-70s. And he said, who in the hell, stands up to the Veteran Affairs? And I'm like, well, I did. I'm not no outgoing extrovert. At best, Sandy, I'm an ambivert. I'm somewhere in the middle, and I did it because, 5 women had followed me in the bathroom one day and they cornered me and it wasn't a scary thing. They just like, we knew you worked in HR. Isn't this illegal? What's going on? We're watching, people with GEDs move up to jobs that are 90,000 a year, while there's all these women and men. It was mostly women, in the revenue part of the VA. And a lot of these people had MBAs, advanced degrees, or years of experience, or they had all of it, including myself. We're all trying to get promoted, and the people who get promoted are the family and friends. So by speaking up, a lot of good things did happen at the end. I like to skip all the ugly in the middle. We know what bullying is. We know what retaliation is. And just about everybody's been through some experience of somebody, being ugly to them. Pretty good outcomes, end up having to hire a lot more Black employees. And I was able to share my story. I become a life coach, syndicated radio talk host about 4 years ago. Before that, I was a podcaster. I've written some books, as you said, how to stand up to workplace bullying and discrimination, because I say everybody, a lot of people came forward like, how did you do what you just did? And I thought, I cannot take this, with me to the grave. Everything I did was through documentation. So I wrote the workbook, Sandy, and it took about 2 years. And, that was a couple years ago, I wrote the workbook because, people can tell you all day long, bullying is ugly, discrimination is ugly. But how do you power through it? So when I wrote the book, I had a lot of employment attorneys like, oh, I didn't know this, I didn't know that. And I'm like, yeah, it took me 2 years to write. I interviewed other people because it's not all just about me. There's a lot of people out there that get mistreated for speaking up, but we should never be ashamed of speaking up. And we should never, ever fear being called a whistleblower. I don't know why people think a whistleblower is so much controversy. When somebody's speaking up for the betterment, they should be, at least acknowledged or validated or, applauded. I don't need a tap on the back. But that's my story. And that's how I got into serving and helping other people, is by being a whistleblower.
Well, that's a fantastic summary, and I'm sure you could have spent hours talking about this. So thank you so much for our listeners to compact it in. And but it's also caused so many questions. I don't know where to start. I think first I'm just going to clear up a couple of details, about your story, and then we'll get into how to advise our listeners on how to be a whistleblower. What the first thing that came to mind is, how could they legally stop your paycheck?
Oh, well, very, very good question. They did. They did. See, one thing about the government is when you sue, you're not suing the individual. And maybe you know this already, Sandy, but not everybody knows that. You're suing the Secretary of the Veteran Affairs if you file charges, okay?
Mhm.
So I guess there was no fear from management, and I'm assuming that they would have, any ramifications for doing that. I don't like to call myself disabled, but the Veteran Affairs rates me as a disabled veteran. And I have some disabilities, and not all disabilities are right there in your face. I don't walk with a cane or have a wheelchair, but I have some disabilities, and I asked for what's called, and this is an HR thing, a reasonable accommodation to work from home, because the job I was doing at the time was all computerized, and many people were working from home with what they call an RA, reasonable accommodation. So I went through the process to ask for that, and I was denied that. And so that opened up a Equal Employment Opportunity Commission charges that I filed for disability discrimination. And when I did that, I got more retaliation, more false charges put against me, lots of harassment. Um, my phone was even tapped, and I found that out later on. And I found out that it's very easy to have your phone tapped. And I don't say this to scare anybody, because at any time, Homeland Security could be listening in. And I know why they do it. It's for national security. But for,
And we discussed the other day,
yeah,
before this interview, that it's very easy. It's relatively easy for someone to get your phones tapped. It's way easier than it should be.
yeah, I think there's devices on the internet you can buy, but how it was done is the Secretary of the Veteran Affairs, or somebody acting in their capacity, goes to a federal judge and they get a warrant. And the warrant, they don't sit there and say, is this a whistleblower? Is this somebody filing charges? And so for 1 year, they were able to record me. And I know that because, I found out about the warrant. And then two, when I tried to call a family member and another whistleblower who was one of the 5 Black employees, I had to hang up, call and hang up. And the 6th time I called them, it broke whatever codes or whatever, and then they could hear me. And strange enough, Sandy, that all disappeared the day after I settled with the VA.
Wow.
So, and where did I get this information? I actually got it from Tom, because I asked, how can they tap? How can somebody legally tap a whistleblower's phone? I had done no wrong. Can you imagine how creepy it would be to have your phone, every word you utter for over a year, listened to? It's
Well,
creepy.
as a matter of fact, I assumed my phones were bugged for years. I just assumed it. It was easier to assume it and be careful what I said over the phone than it was. Well, I now know, thanks to you, that there is a way to find out how, if your phones are being bugged by the government. You want to go ahead and share that with our listeners?
Yeah, I'm glad you're bringing this up. I think it's so very, very, very important. What Tom had advised me is you can do this yourself, but it always seems to work faster if you work through an attorney, and it doesn't really cost that much to do it. The attorney would write the company, your cell phone company, if you have a landline, or it may be the same company or it may be 2 different companies. And they are allowed to ask, is the phone being tapped by anybody? And if it is, they have to provide, there's a law, they have to provide the warrant. And that's what my
Wow.
friend Andrea did.
Wow. So we have rights we don't even know about.
And she showed me what the warrant looked like. I'm like, get the heck out of here.
Wow.
I'm like,
Wow.
how awful, that total
And
invasion of privacy, and I've done nothing wrong.
And this is why we have this show. People, our listeners need to know things like this. I wish someone had told me 10 years ago that
Yeah.
all I had to do was ask my supplier, what are they called? The platform that she used. But we're talking like AT&T or Verizon, I mean them. And by
Yes.
law, they have to answer if my phone's being
They
bugged.
have to. Yeah, the
Wow.
attorney knows how to write it up.
Wow.
Yeah, and they have to turn it around, because you can be compelled, by a judge, in litigation to have to turn that over, and they know that, and they will respond
Wow.
back and let you know.
Real good
So
to know. So everybody got that. If you think your phone's being bugged, just ask your what's it called, the phone people. Okay, just ask them, and they have to answer you, and they have to be honest and have to show
yeah,
you the warrant. Wow.
and send a letter certified, but attorney always gets, let's
Wow.
just face it, there's a little bit of intimidation when an attorney does it, that if they don't answer properly, that they could be
They
found
could get
at
in trouble, right? So, and that's another. And I've said this 1,000 times to our listeners. If you can get an attorney, get one. If you've got a friend who's an attorney, just send in with you have a request, send an attorney's letter with it.
Mhm.
That's going to get noticed. It works. It works great, and you usually have a friend that won't charge you to do that. And so anyway, notes for the wise. So another thing you said, Dawn, that I thought was so interesting, it was right when you first started talking, that this is not the first, but the second time that
Mhm.
you found yourself being a whistleblower. Now that's happened to me too. And it's interesting how people like you and me and our listeners out there, you know, we see things and
Mhm.
see something needs to be done.
Mhm.
Whereas the other type of person, I guess type A and type B, or type A and Z, the others somehow don't see it. And if they do see it, don't feel compelled like you and I do, Dawn, and hopefully lots of our listeners to do something about it. So I just thought that was fascinating when you said that. And I wasn't surprised in the slightest, not at all. These
Yeah.
things kind of find us when we're not even looking for them, right?
Yeah, I have to say that, it's so crazy. If I can jump in and just say, it's amazing because one of those five Black employees that were working there, she filed EEO charges, which is Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, racial, and it took her 5 years, but she ended up getting a settlement, and we ended up having more Black employees hired and such. And the thing is we're both introverts. I might be more of a middle of the road ambivert, not extreme introvert, but I'm a quiet person. She's a very quiet person. And it's so cool how we came together, because she could have retired, but she wanted to keep working because she was putting money aside, for her grandkids. And then here we work in the same department, and I get to know her. And it took a while because you know, she's real quiet and I'm a quiet person. And then we realized, oh my gosh, I have an HR background. You've worked in the Army. She was in the Army, and you have this equal employment opportunity. You and I both know this is wrong. And she went down her path. I went down my path, and we had good outcomes. But both of us, faced retaliation. I received more of it because I was physically working in the building, and because of medical reasons, she was working at home in her computer. But how about that? Two people come together and become good friends and have a good outcome. And it took time. It didn't happen overnight. It took about 20 months.
Anything worthwhile takes time. And that's something that I don't like to tell our listeners, but they need to know. Anything important, anything that big, it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take some time. And but however, there's lots of good things happen. And one of the things that I cherish is all the friends I've made
Oh,
doing the work I did of exposing the Army Corps of Engineers, not so much that their levies failed. I mean, they made a mistake. What I exposed, me and a team of people exposed that they tried to cover it up and almost got away with it. That was the crime, the cover up.
your
So,
mission is incredible, Sandy. I just get chills thinking about what you've been through, and your honesty, your ethics, and your courage is just
well,
amazing.
thank you and thank you. But but I would love to talk about with you about how you handled the bullying, because in my case it was online.
Mhm.
That they weren't in my face, but in your case it must have been the actual physical people. So talk to our listeners about that, please.
Yeah, oh gosh. Yeah, I was physically working in the building because the management denied me working at home, which I was entitled to by law. And so it become every day I would be called into the office, and then I was charged with false charges and such. I mean, I think there was like it's been 12 years since this happened. There was 14 charges of retaliation, cutting my paycheck off, denying me a reasonable accommodation, charging me. I was on administrative leave for 100 something days while they tried to fire me with all kind of false charges. But the phone tapping was just unreal. I mean, I'm sitting there trying to talk to my mother. That was the family member, trying to talk to Angela, knowing that these people were listening in. And sometimes I would say false things to my mom, but I would see her and tell her, I'm going to say some crazy things on the phone. But that's because I know it's being recorded and somebody's listening in. So it's quite intimidating. And, you know, after all this ended, Sandy, I was able to help a lot of other VA whistleblowers, and I was able to help other whistleblowers in other, not government. And a lot of people will come up to me and say, I want to be a whistleblower. And I'm like, that's fine and dandy. And that says something positive about you. But let me tell you, don't just go jumping in and blowing the whistle without having a strategy. You got to have strategies. It might be a support team, it might be an attorney. You may have to get counseling if you get bullied. I had to get counsel. I chose. I'm very glad I got counseling because at one time I was feeling weak and I felt victimhood, and I hate that. I'm thinking, oh my God, I spent 20 years in the Air Force. In 1985, I went in, there's like 11% women in the Air Force. I get out and it's doubled in 2005 to about 22%. So I've been in a man's world, and I have seven brothers and stepbrothers. So, I've grown up with and been around a lot of men, and I can be very, very assertive. But I tell people, I don't care how courageous you are, how honest you are, how motivated you are, everybody has a breaking point. And after almost 20 months of it, I mean, I started falling apart because it's me against the big guys. It's the David and Goliath story. Um, I did a lot of praying, but I think my biggest shift, and this is what I teach people today with the work I do, is even when it sucks like crazy, something bad's happening, you're being bullied, you've got to see the bigger picture. And thankfully, I'm the big picture person, not the detail person. And you got to see the outcome that you want. And the biggest reframe is, yes, this sucks, but I don't have to be a victim. Yes, this sucks. I am losing my home. This sucks that I have to sell 80% of all my items because I lost all my money,
Hmm.
from the veteran affairs. It was quite a bit. Thankfully, I had some money, but I went through a lot of money really quick because they dragged it out, because that's part of the bullying and trying to get rid of you. But it's reframing. Don't be a victim. Yes, this sucks, but you can get through it. You know, Praying, meditating, keeping yourself grounded. There's so many different strategies to get up each day and say, I know I don't like what's going on, but I can get through this, because the final outcome was so powerful.
Yeah, that's something to be so incredibly proud of. But I believe it's fair to say that it is more difficult to speak out for the public good from within an organization, if you have an employer, that is a more challenging than in my case, where I spoke out for the public good, but I wasn't working for the Army Corps of Engineers. So I
Mhm.
could get up in the middle of the street on a soapbox and yell. In fact, even a major colonel with the Army Corps of Engineers, um, just before I really took off and started really pulling back the cover, pulling aside the curtain, shall we, and
Yeah.
exposing the Army Corps of Engineers. But just before that, this colonel said to me that I had more power to change the way things are done at the Army Corps of Engineers than he did. So
Wow.
he proved, I mean, that's true. It's hard from within an organization to change things, but it can be done. It's a different type of David and Goliath story when you're working from within. And so that's a great reason for y'all out there who are considering beating the big guys from within to perhaps pick up a copy of Dawn's book. I also interviewed somebody who worked from within at Boeing, and
Mhm.
he tried to change the way things were done and was acting as a whistleblower from within Boeing. And it was very, very, very difficult. And lo and behold, 6 months later, all the Boeing planes started flying apart. Isn't that
Mhm.
incredible?
Mhm.
So he was on the right track and he was trying,
Yes.
but not impossible. Not anything worthwhile is difficult.
Yeah, I have to agree with you, Sandy. And, when I was able to hold the Veteran Affairs accountable, it was through documentation. And a lot of people don't know how to document what's going on. I did a lot of email trails and such, and that's in my workbook. We're 2 days down before a court hearing, and finally the Veteran Affairs staff say, we'll settle. And but I said, I'm not going to sign any kind of gag order because I want to talk about my story, not to be a shiro or a hero, but if I can talk about it, then I can tell other people my story so that they realize that it can also be done. And they just need to know how to do it properly so that they receive a whole lot less problems than I did. Most people don't go through what I went through. I know that I'm exceptional. When I say exceptional, my case was exceptional. Most people do not go through all this, but there are people who have been really brutalized as whistleblowers. A lot of times it's a whole lot less retaliation, and thank goodness.
But then sticks and stones can break your bones, but
Yes.
names will never hurt you, like the Taylor Swift song. So the the bullying that you received, what I like to do is when I when I think about these people who are being so mean and ugly, I remind myself if it weren't them, it'd be someone else. They're under pressures too, that
Yeah.
only they can really totally understand. And you
Well,
just remove them from the equation and stick to what needs to be done. And boy, did you stick with it. And thank you so much and for writing a book. Oh, 2 years to write a book. It took 5 years to write mine. So
mm,
2 years is nothing. 2 years is absolutely nothing. And thank you for doing that. We're about run out of time, Dawn. Is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners before we go?
yes, and thank you. Thank you so much for this opportunity, Sandy. It's so good to know you better. The thing is to stay empowered every day. Ask yourself, what is the next thing you can do to stay empowered, to empower yourself, to improve, this world, to improve your life. It's a mindset. Never feel like a victim, or if you do, don't beat yourself up. Just realize you can reframe it. What have I learned through this experience? And I learned a lot. So I encourage everybody to stay empowered. That's my thing to say.
And I encourage you all too. And boy, Dawn, do I wish I had your book 15 years ago.
Oh,
But
yeah.
but you, the listeners, you can get the book. It's not too late for you. Thank you, Dawn, for joining me, and thank you, the listeners, for being here. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Be sure to like, subscribe, and rate the podcast on all your favorite platforms. And remember, no matter who you are, you too can beat the big guys. Okay, Dawn, stay with me.
I
Just gonna
will.
stop. Just gonna stop recording.
Nice job. Nice job, Sandy.